Welcome. I am known as Aki Tolliver, and I'm an independent researcher of Kushite-Kemetic spiritual science. This is part 2 of a 4-part series, and this is the greatest story ever stolen. This video will talk about astronomy and astrology and how in Africa back 200,000 years ago, and how the people of Africa studied the heavens and applied it to their way of life on Earth. Astronomy. Astronomy is the study of the universe and its contents outside of Earth's atmosphere. Astronomers examine the positions, motions, and properties of celestial objects. This is Adam's calendar in South Africa. It is the oldest area found for the purpose of studying the celestial heavens. Adam's calendar, based off scientific research, dates around 75,000 BC. This is Tia in Ethiopia, the second oldest planetarium on Earth. This is Nabta Playa in Ethiopia, the third oldest planetarium. Is where our ancestors studied the heavens. This is a Kemet mapping of star constellations. So this is the Commission. When I say Kemet, that's Kemet, and the people of Kemet, which is Egypt, showing a mapping of mapping the stars. And we see the many stars listed here. And on the right side in the middle, we see a constellation next to another constellation. And that constellation is Orion, which is a star, keeping Apis, Taurus, the bull, at bay. So that's Orion is the hunter, and here he's holding a spear at Taurus, the bull. And that is astronomy. Astrology is the study of how the positions, motions, and properties of the universe affect the people and events on Earth. And the ancestors studied the heavens and applied it to themselves on Earth and created universities in doing so. So the root word of universities is universe, which is the study of the universe. The African term for university is Apis Aset. Apet Aset. This is a depiction of what they studied and what they mapped out. This is showing all the stars in the night sky that they will see, and it's showing those stars mapped into different constellations. And a constellation is a group of stars forming a recognizable pattern, traditionally named after its apparent form or mythological figure. And there are 88 constellations. And what you see here also, it looks like flowing water there, or a river, is the Milky Way. And all 9 planets fall upon the Milky Way. let's talk about some of these constellations. Here we see Virgo shown on the left. Virgo is one of the constellations, and from research, I believe Virgo represented the Holy Mother Isis, or Aset. And that's Aset shown on the right. And notice the similarities of the shape of Virgo and Aset. That's her Set also is holding her son, Peru. Here we have another constellation, Orion. On the top left, we see Asar, which is the Greek word Osiris, represents Orion in the heavens. And at the bottom left, on the bottom left side, we see Orion, and we see Apis, Taurus, the bull, right beside him in the heavens. Asar, on the right there, is wearing the white crown of ancient Upper Egypt on his head. So let's go back to the bottom left. We see that Orion is looks like a man, but he has no head. But looks like he's grabbing Apis Taurus, the bull. And when he grabs the Taurus, the bull, and places on his head, it looks like the crown or the headdress of Asar on the right. I'll give you a chance to look at that. So Orion places Taurus on his head, and we get Asar on the right. So Asar was not a god, was not a real person, but represented Orion with the head of Taurus in the heavens. Let's look at some more crowns that the kings wore in Kemet. On the top left, we have the white crown of ancient Egypt, the top middle, the red crown, and then sometimes the king will wear the double crown, representing the unification of Upper and Lower Kemet. The red crown is actually Lepus in the heavens. So we look at the bottom left, we see the constellation Lepus, the hare, and if we rotate it, it looks like the red crown that the king would wear. Lepus was also considered Orion's chair, so that Lepus in the heavens sits right up under Orion. And if we look at all these constellations, we see Lepus under Orion in the middle. We see Apis, Taurus the bull. We see Gemini on the top left. Okay. In the middle, behind Orion, we see Canis Minor. We see Monoceros. And in the bottom left, we see Canis Major, looks like a dog. Orion's chair again, which is Lepus. And Eridanus on the right side. Let's focus on Eridanus. Eridanus was considered, in Orion's chair together, Lepus was considered the supergiant. Why is that? I'll give you a moment to look at these two constellations, and what does it resemble to you? It may resemble a pharaoh. The pharaoh wearing the headdress with the beard, and we have the snake coming from his forehead. Kind of appears like these two constellations together. And let's pull back a little bit and add some more constellations. We add Orion to the picture, and where we have the supergiant next to Orion, where Orion's coming out of the mouth of the supergiant, where Orion is considered the word of God at this point. And we add a constellation to the back of the supergiant. So that's another constellation added, where it's Lepus and Eridanus. And we kind of see that the supergiant now has a long body. I believe the supergiant, those constellations, is the Celestial Sphinx in the heavens, and that the Sphinx on Earth was a representation of the supergiant in the heavens. The Sphinx on Earth, which is right next to the Great Pyramids in Egypt, which is Kemet, is called the Shesep Ankh. And notice that the head is much smaller than the body. Now, these are the people who developed and perfected math, were the first to create math, where it came from. So they knew how to make things proportionately. But why would they make the Sphinx with a small head? So I'll give you what I think occurred. So we look at the supergiant, and this is the supergiant sitting on the horizon back in 14,000 BC. And that supergiant was also called Hu, and Hu is facing eastwards, just like our Sphinx on Earth faces eastwards. And visibly directly behind the supergiant, we have another constellation. Looks like 3 triangles, but that is the constellation Phoenix, which stands for rebirth. And those 3 triangles of the Phoenix constellation represents the 3 great pyramids on Earth. Let's continue to look at the constellations. So as the supergiant goes from 17,000 BC, so I dated back in the beginning believing that Kemet is as old as 17,000 BC or older, because the people of Ta-Seti, the first city, had to develop or create the Sphinx, and they, I believe, looked at the heavens in creating the Sphinx, and they can only see the supergiant around 17,000 BC, and this is showing that the supergiant was sinking, beginning to sink. So around 13,000 BC, we see the supergiant at the top beginning to sink below the horizon. And then around 10,000 BC, the supergiant the body is mostly under the horizon, and only the top of the head is showing. So it's starting to lose its relevance to the people on Earth. So they had to look for something else. The Sphinx was losing its meaning and purpose. So the head was replaced. And what was it replaced with? I believe it was replaced with Virgo. So the head was originally a bigger head that matched the size of the body a little more, and it was later replaced by the woman head representing Isis or Aset or Virgo in the heavens. Okay, and just before I forget, on the left side we see that Aset, the Neteru, would have the chair or the throne on her head, because back in ancient Africa, the woman owned the land and gave rights of kingship to the man. And so Aset gave Asar kingship through her endowed power to provide kingship to the land. And that's why you have the throne. She gives the throne to the king. That's why the chair is on her head. Also, the body of the supergiant began to sink under the horizon. So they use the constellation Leo to represent the body of the Sphinx on Earth instead of that of the supergiant. So we notice here that the supergiant now becomes Virgo and Leo, because we see here the weathering of the body is much older than the head. So the head is newer, so the head was once replaced. That's just my beliefs, and that's why it's much smaller than the body of here listed. So the Great Sphinx head is the woman, which is Virgo, wearing the king's headdress, and Leo instead of the Celestial Sphinx lepus. So let's go back and look at Orion again. Orion is Asar. The Greek word for Asar is Osiris. So we see, and the Phoenix, which I mentioned earlier, this is just to show you a clear picture, has 3 triangles, and that is also the Great Pyramids. So I believe the Great Pyramids were built for representing Asar. Okay, because Asar is the one of rebirth. In the coming forth by day, as I showed you, Haru led Ani to Asar to provide the spirit, to provide rebirth, and that came through Asar. And this is the 3 pyramids again, in which the constellation Phoenix. So also, we're going to look at some more constellations. And we have here the constellation Orion represents a cobra. And at the bottom left, we see a circle with a dot in the middle, which is also considered the eye of Ra, the all-seeing eye and divine authority. And that's a snake coming from the eye of Ra. So that eye of Ra is Draco and Ursa Minor together. And the cobra is Uraeus. So many kings, just like King Tut, as we show here, the boy king, would wear the Uraeus on their head. Wasn't worshiping snakes, it was actually the constellation in the heavens, Draco, Ra, that represented the sun, the eye of Ra. And that's a Uraeus on his head. Let's continue of the cobra, and which is Draco, and the vulture. The vulture is Aquila in the heavens, the constellation Aquila. And we see at the bottom left what those 2 constellations look like. Okay. And then you'll see kings and queens wear a headdress of the cobra and the vulture. The cobra stood for Lower Egypt and the vulture for Upper Egypt. This is called a Haru Bedhet. It is a symbol that was placed on the doorways, above the doorways of many temples in Kemet, and it stands for Know Thyself. And notice we have in the middle the sun, Ra, with 2 cobras, and there's wings of the cobra. Excuse me, wings of the vulture. And this is the wall of a temple in Kemet showing okay, so many Egyptologists believe that the corridors in the pyramids were aligned to the constellations in the heavens. So in the Great Pyramids, there were no sarcophagus, there were no kings found, no mummies, there were no hieroglyphs, or we call metu-netters on the wall. What I believe this was a place, a spiritual place, where one is taken to be connected to the universe, to the heavens. And it may have other purposes, but we see on the right side that the corridor is aligned to those heavens. It's aligned to Canis Major, which has the star Sirius. We have Orion, we have Lepus, all the constellations that I just mentioned. On the bottom left, we also show the Geb, Nut. We have the first Trinity mentioned, shown there, as I showed before. Okay, and on the top left, we show that creation story in the heavens. We see Ra, Nut, Geb in the heavens. If we took Orion's, there's 7 stars of Orion, and in the belt of Orion, if we took those 3 stars and placed them on the top picture of the pyramids, they align perfectly. So that's what we see here of the 3 stars of Orion's belt mapped directly to the 3 great pyramids in Kemet. And also on the picture on the right, we see those 3 stars of Orion's belt aligned to the 3 great pyramids, and how the Milky Way, which is right next to Orion's belt in the heavens, is the actual celestial Nile. So the Nile River is directly next to the great pyramids on Earth, just like the 3 stars of Orion are next to the Milky Way in the heavens. So the Nile was the representation, is representing the Milky Way in the heavens. So our ancestors in Kemet aligned the pyramids, the temples, and all the physical parts of their culture and cities to the heavens. They also used the sun to help guide them throughout the year. So they create the calendar, and a calendar helped them understand what part of the year it was, and to plan out harvesting of crops, to plan out the inundation of the Nile. So there was peace within themselves because they understood nature. They understood when they can apply nature to themselves, so they can be able to not have a fear of not being without food, because they knew and understood nature. So when you're comfortable and when you're not hunter and gatherers and you're comfortable, you can create mathematics, you can create the sciences, and develop all the great things that we don't know that come from Kemet today. And they were able to create the great pyramids because they were peaceful with themselves and with nature and followed Ma'at. So here we show the sun rays, how those 3 smaller pyramids, the shadows fall upon the great pyramid and allows them to determine what time of year it is. And in knowing the times of year, they created months. They knew that the days were 24 hours, and they knew that the seconds, minutes, all come from Africa. And here is showing how the 12 months are divided, and then their year started in April. So April helped them determine when the inundation of the Nile would occur. So that was the spring equinox. So Easter is determined even today by the first full moon after the spring equinox. And why Orion and the star is so important and why he's the head netter is because the sun crosses over Orion into Taurus. And then when that occurs after the spring equinox, that's when Asar is bringing in the inundation of the Nile, which brings in the planting of seeds later on in the year, which brings in the harvest. So he was bringing in the flooding of the Nile each year. So that's why he was the head netter. Okay. This is the Congo Cross. This is considered the tree of life. It is a circle with a dot in the middle. And on the left side, we have the circle divided by a horizontal and vertical line, where the horizontal line represents the horizon. And on the right side of that line, horizontal line, is where the sun rises in the east. So it's the east side of the circle. And just picture that below the horizontal line is the earth, and above it is the sky. So the sun rises in the east, and through its linear path along the ecliptic, rises and sets in the west. And that's considered your daily life. When you rise up in the morning and you experience life, and then you fall in the west, and you go into westing, and you set in when the sun goes under the horizon and becomes night. That's your peaceful state and where you meet Asar. So here is showing that comes from the Congo, which is the Pygmy-Twa people. This predates Kush and even Egypt, which is Kemet. So on the right side, the simpler depiction of it, they call it the Kala, Ka, as the birth. And as the sun goes up, it's midday, that's your life. And then it sets in the west, that symbolizes death or westing. And then at the nighttime, the midnight is considered rebirth. So we're going to go into that a lot later on. So this comes from the first people of the Homo sapiens sapiens, the Pygmy-Twa people. And that concludes astrology. So in this video, we talked about astronomy and astrology. Well, astronomy is the study of is looking at the heavens, and astrology is studying those heavens and applying it to yourself here on Earth and using the heavens just map out the stars and to help create the first calendar. It helped guide the Cometians and the Kushites in navigating the waters using the stars as a compass. So it's using the heavens even in your spirituality, and where we know that there's no gods in their culture, that those aspects of nature were created from constellations that were developed by looking at the heavens. So that concludes this presentation. The next presentation, the third part of this and fourth parts, talk about religion. And this is the books that I recommend, some of the books that can lead you on your journey in studying African history. As these are some of our elders and ancestors who created the authors of those books. Thank you once again, and I wish you peace.